Man frees crying canine German shepherd from street trap. What she does next will break you. She was a canine once, a protector, a hero. Now, she was barely surviving, whimpering in the shadows of a back alley, caught in a trap meant for strays. Everyone else passed by, everyone except him. What he did that day would not only save her life, but uncover a bond neither of them could have imagined. And what she did afterward will break your heart in the best way. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. It helps us bring you more emotional and inspiring stories like this one. Get ready because this story will change how you see loyalty, pain, and the healing power of love. It was a kind of night that wrapped the streets in silence. The alley behind David Jameson's auto repair shop was soaked in shadows, lit only by a single flickering light above a dented back door. Trash cans lined the brick wall, the faint scent of oil and metal clinging to the air. David had stayed late again, elbows deep in a half-disassembled engine, trying to keep his mind off the silence of his empty apartment upstairs. That's when he heard it. A sound so soft he nearly missed it, just a faint broken whimper. It stopped, then came again, jagged like a sob stuck in a dry throat. He froze, set down his wrench, listened. Not a cat, not wind, it was pain. David walked the back door and pushed it open. The alley greeted him with a breeze, thick with city dust and the hum of distant traffic. He took a cautious step forward, eyes scanning. Then he saw the movement. A flash of fur, low to the ground just beyond the dumpster. He moved slowly, heart picking up speed. Behind the rusted bin, pressed in the corner of two cracked concrete walls, was a German shepherd. She was trembling violently, one hind leg caught in a rusted steel snare, blood streaking her paw dark against the dirt. Her coat was filthy, tangled, but what stopped David in his tracks were her eyes, wide, golden, and full of the kind of fear that didn't come from the streets alone. She didn't bark, didn't growl, just stare at him, her body tight with pain and something else, resignation, as if she'd already decided no one was coming. David crouched, speaking softly. "Hey there, it's okay. I see you. I'm not going to hurt you." The dog flinched but didn't move. She couldn't. The snare had cut into her leg deep enough to stain the cracked sidewalk below her. David moved closer. She gave a weak growl, teeth bared, not with aggression but fear. That's when he saw the collar. Faded leather, no tags, but a number was etched into a small metal plate. Not a name, just K9's 89. His chest tightened. "You were military," he whispered. "You served." He took out his pocket knife, hand steady despite the thudding of his heart. "This is going to hurt, girl, but I promise I've got you." It wasn't easy. The metal resisted. The dog's muscles twitched. Once, she tried to nip at his arm, but her body was too weak. Weak. He kept talking, his voice steady, grounding. After a few minutes, the mechanism snapped loose with a sharp clack. She cried out, short, painful, but didn't bolt. She couldn't. Without thinking, David slid his arms under her, lifting her gently. She was lighter than he expected, too light, bones under fur. Her breath was shallow. She didn't fight, just rested her head against his arm as he carried her inside. He sat her on an old fleece blanket in the corner of the shop. Her leg bled slowly, and he worked quickly to wrap it in a clean rag. She watched him, eyes wide, but no longer wild, just tired. So damn tired. He ran a hand down her back, felt every rib. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" She blinked slowly, and he could have sworn she understood every word. He brought her water in a small bowl. She didn't move, but when he sat down beside her just a few feet away, she inched forward, trembling, and rested her head against his knee. A soft sound left her throat, not a growl, not a whine, something between, a whisper of trust. David swallowed hard. He'd seen a lot in this city. Broken men, forgotten children, but this was something else. She had been trained to serve, to obey, to protect. And someone had abandoned her like garbage, left her to die in the dark. But even now, in pain and alone, she had chosen to trust him. He ran his fingers gently behind her ears. "You're safe now," he said softly. "You don't have to be strong tonight." Her eyes closed slowly, and for the first time in what felt like forever, She slept. The next morning, she was still breathing. David had barely slept. He'd stayed in the shop with her, wrapped in a flannel blanket on the old leather couch, waking every hour to check if she was still alive. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She hadn't moved much, but her ears twitched every time he got close. He brought her a small bowl of chicken broth, warm and rich, not too hot, and set it near her nose. She sniffed it, eyes barely open, but made no move to drink. "Come on," he whispered. "You've got to eat something." She lifted her head just slightly, just enough to show him she'd heard, then dropped it back down. Her body was exhausted. Everything in her looked defeated. David sat down beside her again, legs crossed, back against the wall. The shop was quiet, the city just beginning to hum outside. This space, usually filled with the clang of tools and the grind of machines, felt like a sanctuary now, a hospital, a war zone. He stared at her and whispered, "Who left you?" No answer, of course, but her eyes opened slow, thoughtful, and met his. "I'm going to call you Hope," he said quietly, "because that's what you're giving me just by staying alive." For the next hour, he stayed by her side, reading on his phone about how to treat shock in dogs, how to care for wounds, what signs to watch for. He wasn't a vet. He wasn't even a dog person before this. But now, it was like her pain had cracked something inside him wide open and he couldn't look away. By noon, she tried to stand. Her legs wobbled and folded beneath her, and she let out a sharp yelp that made David jump. "Whoa, easy, easy." "No rush," he said gently, placing a hand near her neck. Careful not to startle her, but she didn't flinch. She let him touch her. That alone was a miracle. He tried to coax her into taking a few sips of water. Eventually, she licked his fingers and then slowly the edge of the bowl, just a few laps. Nothing more, but it was something. It meant she was fighting. Later that day, David left her sleeping and drove across town to a vet clinic. They wouldn't come out without an appointment. They wouldn't make house calls. They offered to take her in, surrender her, they said. But something about that word didn't sit right with him. She wasn't something to surrender. She was a survivor. So he bought supplies instead. Wound cleaning kits, soft bandages, a heating pad, antibiotic cream. The woman behind the counter asked what kind of dog he had. He hesitated before saying, "A K9. She looked surprised. "Military retired?" he said. "But barely." He drove back to the shop with his jaw clenched. When he returned, Hope had moved just a few inches toward the door. Her blanket was slightly ruffled. Her eyes were open. She'd waited for him. "Good girl," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "I'm here." As he cleaned or wound, she didn't growl. She didn't pull away. In fact, she laid her head down and let him work, like she knew somehow that this was kindness, that this was different. That night, as he turned off the lights and sat back on the couch, Hope let out a low, soft noise. Not pain, not fear, a sound like breath, like relief. He smiled, tired but full. She was healing. But something still sat heavy on his mind. She had a number. She had training. She had a history. And David couldn't help but wonder, who was she before the streets? Who had trained her, fought beside her, abandoned her? And more importantly, would they come back for her? It had been 3 days since David pulled her from that alley trap. 3 days of silence, slow healing, and whispered encouragements between oil-stained tools and the ticking of the wall clock. Hope was moving more now, carefully, stiffly, but moving. She could stand long enough to drink water on her own, and that morning, she'd managed to limp across the shop floor to the back door when David opened it. She stood in the doorway for a moment, nose twitching at the scent of the street, but made no move to go outside. He stood behind her. "You're not ready for that yet, are you?" She turned her head slightly, just enough to glance up at him, then sat. Her injured leg still shook when she put weight on it, but the bleeding had stopped and the swelling had gone down. David had done what he could with the help of online guides and quiet prayers whispered over bowls of broth. Now he wanted answers. He waited until she fell asleep again, curled tightly in the corner of the shop, where the sunlight warmed the floor. Then he took a picture of her collar, the one with the stamped numbers K989. He uploaded the image to a military veteran dog registry site. A long shot, but worth it. He left the computer running and stepped back, watching her from across the room. There was something about the way she slept. She never let herself go completely. One ear always perked, muscles tense. She was always ready. Even in rest, she carried the ghost of whatever she'd been trained to do. He wondered what kind of life she had before this, who she trusted, who betrayed her, and why she was alone now. By late afternoon, the email came in. Subject, possible match K989. David's breath caught as he clicked the message open. Name, Freya. Breed, German Shepherd. Unit, Tactical Narcotics K9, Chicago Metro. Handler, Sergeant Raymond Ellis. Status, decommissioned, injured in line of duty, 2021. Disposition, unconfirmed. David stared at the words, his stomach twisting. Injured, decommissioned, unconfirmed. She was more than a soldier. She had a name. Freya, he whispered, looking over at her. She stirred slightly. He read further. There was a handler, Ellis. No further info. A phone number was listed. Old, possibly inactive. But David grabbed his phone and dialed anyway. Rings. 4 to 5 rings. Voicemail. He didn't leave a message. He stared at the screen, unsure what he was even hoping for. That someone would want her back? That someone missed her? Or was he afraid they would? That night, Freya refused her dinner. She paced the shop in slow, limping circles. Her ears perked at every sound outside, every car that passed. She was alert in a way he hadn't seen since that first day. Something had changed. David sat on the floor, cross-legged, watching her. Is someone looking for you? She looked at him, and this time it felt different. She knew. He stood and crossed the room to the bay door. He opened it slowly, letting in the cool evening air. Freya followed him, stopped just at the threshold, and sat, her body tense, watching, listening. Across the street, a black SUV had parked where no one usually parked. Its engine was running. Freya growled, low and deep from her chest. David stepped beside her, his eyes narrowing. The SUV didn't move. No one got out. No headlights flashed. Just silence. And then it drove off slowly, casually. Freya didn't relax until the taillights were gone. David reached down, resting a hand lightly on her back. I don't know who you were with, he said softly, but if they're coming back, they'll have to go through me first. She didn't growl again. She just pressed her head against his leg. Not fear, trust, but David could feel in the air now. Something was coming. And whatever Freya had been running from, it wasn't done with her yet. David didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards upstairs, every engine that passed outside, every shift in the wind, all had him on edge. Freya curled up near the front of the shop, facing the door like a silent sentinel. She didn't bark. She didn't flinch. But her breathing was shallow and her muscles tensed at every sound. It was like she could smell something David couldn't. Around 3 a.m., he sat beside her, sipping cold coffee and staring at the tools scattered across his workbench. He'd fixed hundreds of cars in this space. He'd patched engines, rebuilt transmissions, welded frames back together. But nothing in his life had prepared him for this. A dog who didn't just need saving but protecting. He picked up his phone again and stared at the number from the registry, the one listed for Sergeant Raymond Ellis, the handler. He pressed redial. Voicemail again. He didn't leave a message. But this time, someone texted back. Who is this? David stared at the screen, heart suddenly pounding. I have Freya. She's alive, hurt but safe. No reply. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Then the phone rang. David answered on the first ring. Hello. A man's voice, rough, breathless, like he hadn't spoken in hours. Say that again. She's here. I found her, trapped in an alley behind my shop. A snare had her leg. She's been with me for 4 days. Silence. Where? David hesitated. His eyes flicked to Freya. She was watching him, ears up, tail twitching nervously. Why was she abandoned? David asked, a sharp breath on the other end. She wasn't. She went missing 2 years ago. We were ambushed during a raid. She bolted after a flashbang. I searched for weeks. They said she was probably killed. She wasn't, David said. I need to see her. David's hand tightened around the phone. I don't know if she wants to be found. She was my partner, the man said. We saved each other more times than I can count. David looked at Freya again. She hadn't looked away. Her head tilted slightly, as if she knew who was on the line. Come tomorrow, David said finally. 10 a.m. My name's David. Bring proof. I won't let her go to just anyone. I'll be there, the man said, and the line went dead. David put down the phone, crawled toward Freya. Slow, cautious. She rested her head against his foot. He didn't speak. He just reached down and stroked behind her ears. I don't know what's right, he whispered, but I know I don't want to lose you. The next morning, the city was quiet. Gray skies, humid air, like something was about to break. David didn't open the shop. He paced. He cleaned. He waited. At 10:07 a.m., the doorbell chimed. Freya bolted upright. David opened the front door. A man stood there in jeans and a wrinkled military jacket, holding a folder in one hand. His eyes were bloodshot, haunted. He didn't look like a man who had moved on. Sergeant Ellis? David asked. The man nodded. That's her, isn't it? David stepped aside. Freya stood in the middle of the room, rigid. Ellis dropped to one knee. Freya, he whispered. She didn't move. He opened his arms, voice trembling. It's me, girl. I didn't stop looking. Freya took one step forward, then another, then she stopped. She looked back at David, her eyes full of questions, of loyalty split in two. David's heart cracked. He nodded. It's okay. Go on. Freya turned back to Ellis, barked once, loud and sharp, then rushed him. He caught her, tears breaking from his eyes as he cradled her against his chest. You came back, he whispered. You're okay. David turned away, swallowing the lump in his throat. This was right, wasn't it? But when he glanced back, Freya had broken from Ellis's arms. She walked back to David, sat beside him, and chose him. The look in Ellis's face said it all. She remembered him, but she belonged here now. David thought the hardest part would be letting her go. But now, standing in his own shop with Freya pressed against his side and her former handler watching with glassy eyes, he realized the real challenge wasn't losing her. It was knowing she might be taken away. Ellis didn't say much at first. He sat on an overturned crate near the tool rack, while Freya remained by David's feet, her head down but alert. She wasn't afraid, just uncertain, like she was waiting for one of them to speak the truth neither wanted to say. I don't want to cause trouble, Ellis said finally. I just needed to know she was okay. David nodded, but his voice was tight when he replied. She's healing. Still weak, still traumatized, but she's here. She was always tough, Ellis said softly. She took a hit from me once during a warehouse raid. Bullet grazed her shoulder instead of hitting me square in the chest. David looked down at her. You didn't give up on her back then. I never did, Ellis said. I begged them to let me keep searching after the raid, but protocol said we had to move forward. We all thought she'd. David swallowed. They were wrong. Ellis gave a faint, bitter smile. I know that now. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Ellis pulled something from his folder, a weathered photo. In it, a younger Freya sat beside Ellis in full gear. She looked strong, sharp, proud. David took it, his heart heavy. She was yours. She still is, Ellis said. At least she was, until she found you. David felt Fr. Ya's head leaned gently against his knee. I'm not trying to take her back, Ellis added more quietly. But I do have a right to ask one thing. David raised an eyebrow. What's that? Ellis hesitated, then said, Do you know why she was in that alley? Do you know who would have set a snare like that in a city block? David stiffened. No. Ellis nodded slowly. Then you should, because it wasn't random. Someone wanted her dead. David's blood chilled. What are you saying? I've been off the force since last year, but I still have friends. I ran some calls this morning after you contacted me. There were rumors back then about a group she and I helped bust, human trafficking cartel linked. We shut down a hub in West Chicago. Freya found the basement where they kept the kids. David's chest tightened. She got media attention for it. The city wanted a hero. But the men we put away? They swore revenge. Said they'd make it personal. When she went missing after the raid, maybe it wasn't an accident, Ellis said. David looked at Freya. Her body hadn't moved, but her eyes had changed. Darker now, focused, like she remembered. They found her, David whispered. Maybe, or someone did. Ellis said, and now you're involved. David stood up. So what? We let her go? Hide her? No, Ellis said. We protect her. Together. David narrowed his eyes. You want to stay? I want to make sure she's safe. For a moment, David didn't answer, but then he felt Freya lean a little harder against him, her breath steady and warm. She wasn't asking for anyone to fix her. She was choosing to stand again, despite the weight of everything behind her, and she trusted him to stand with her. David looked at Ellis. Then we do this right, he said. We find out who set that trap, and we make sure no one ever lays a hand on her again. Freya stood slowly. Her body was still sore, her leg wrapped, but her tail lifted for the first time since she arrived. She stepped forward, looked between both men, and then did something that made David's throat tighten. She placed her paw carefully, silently, on Ellis's boot, a gesture of peace, of memory. But then she turned and walked back to David and sat. Her message was clear. The past to be honored, but she was home now. The shop was no longer just a garage. It had become a safe house, a war room, a place where two men and a dog, haunted by her past, now braced for something they couldn't quite name, but knew was coming. David and Ellis worked in shifts. Ellis slept on a cot in the back room, while David took the couch. Freya patrolled the shop like she'd been assigned to it. Every step measured, every glance sharp. She had started eating more. Her strength was returning. So was her instinct. On the third night, she didn't sleep at all. She paced. Every sound outside made her ears perk. Every shadow made her stand. David noticed it first. Around 2 a.m., she stood at the bay door and refused to move. He walked over, trying to see what she saw, but the street was empty, quiet, still. She didn't budge. Ellis joined them with a flashlight in hand. What's wrong, girl? Freya didn't growl. She didn't bark, but her body stiffened. David turned to Ellis. We're not being paranoid, are we? Ellis shook his head slowly. No, she knows something. They didn't sleep after that. They took turns watching the street. Ellis called in a favor from an old contact at the precinct. Nothing came up. No reports. No strange vehicles. No suspicious activity. But Freya was still on edge, and David had learned something over the past week. When she was on alert, you listened. The next morning, they reviewed the footage from the small security camera above the shop's back entrance. David had installed it months ago, mostly to keep local kids from tagging the alley wall again. What they saw made both men go still. At 4:12 a.m., a figure had walked through the alley. Hood up, face hidden. He stopped beside the back door, looked up at the camera, and smiled. Then he walked away. No break-in. No vandalism. Just a message. I know where you are. David felt cold in his chest. This isn't just about Freya anymore. Ellis leaned forward, jaw clenched. They're sending warnings. Intimidation tactics. Classic cartel behavior. David glanced down at Freya, who sat calmly beside them, eyes locked on the screen. They're watching us, Ellis added. They're waiting to see what we'll do. David stood. So let's give them something to see. They moved Freya into David's apartment upstairs, just in case. Reinforced the door, covered the windows. Ellis reached out to someone at a private security firm. They sent over a burner phone and a surveillance drone. The place became a fortress. Makeshift, fragile, but determined. That night, Freya didn't eat. She sat near the window, staring out like she was waiting. David sat beside her. You remember them, don't you? She didn't move. Back then, when they hurt those kids, you were the one who found them. You saved them. You were the hero. Still nothing. But they couldn't take that, could they? David whispered. So they tried to take you. Freya blinked once. Slow. Then she leaned against him, her body heavier than usual. Not from weight, but meaning. It was her answer. Yes. And now she was ready. At 3:42 a.m., the back window shattered. Glass exploded inward. Freya launched on the rug with a snarl David had never heard before. Deep, guttural, protective. Ellis was already at the front door with a crowbar in hand. David grabbed the flashlight and the phone. Outside, tires screeched. A car tore down the alley. Freya hit the door hard, barking with force that rattled the windows. David opened the back door cautiously. No one in sight. But the shattered glass told the story. A brick had been thrown through the window. Attached to it was a note. She was ours. She dies with you. His hands trembled. Freya growled low beside him, tail rigid. She stepped forward. They're not playing anymore, David said. Freya's body was rigid, her instinct sharp, and something had shifted in the air. They're not, Ella said, and neither were they. They could have run, but they didn't. That morning, after the brick, David and Ellis filed a report. The precinct finally took them seriously. By noon, officers had arrested 2 men linked to the same trafficking ring from Freya's past. One of them had her old tag in his pocket, proof she'd been hunted. But Freya, she never flinched. She stood by the door when they came, sat tall when they showed her photo on the news. And when the officer who took the statement bent down to pet her, she let him, gently, calmly, like she knew she had finally won. Later that evening, Ellis packed his things. She picked you, he said quietly to David, and she's never been wrong before. David knelt down beside her. She placed her head in his hands. That night, for the first time, Freya slept soundly. No pacing, no flinching, just peace. She wasn't just a survivor now. She was home,